Hello and welcome back to the One Shot Show. This is a preview of this month's bonus episode where we talk about improvisational tools beyond yes and. We release these every single month, and to listen to the full version, join us on our Patreon. We'll also be able to find video versions of our regular episodes. You'll be able to submit and vote on questions for our special Q&A episodes, and you'll get access to our community Discord server. But for now, enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to the One Shot Show where GMs go to level up. I am Paddy. I am joined as always by Matt.
And we had to throw out our earlier banter. I'm not in the interest of retreading it because it was organic. It was off the cuff.
It was
improvised.
Maybe again at another time we will encounter that. But improv is our topic for today. I'm interested in exploring, subsequent to all of our yes and discussion, about other techniques, other modes, other tools that I know from my background in improv that I found incredibly useful as a game master, as a dungeon master in my live play at the table, but also sometimes in my prep, how I am lining up beats or moments in a game. This comes from my high school background. I had an amazing theater sports teacher, and through them was exposed to a lot of the work of Keith Johnston and the work that he did in Canada in terms of like formalizing a lot of the rules of improv, the way that live play can move back and forth between a group of people, the way that game can be layered on top of any story to facilitate a sense of playfulness in the players. Matt, what's your improv experience?
Yeah, I'm great at making shit up. I also did theater sports as it happens, and so the odd spot of improvisational theater, mostly through school drama, as in the subject, not the concept. I was involved in a bit of the latter, but yeah, it's sort of we've talked about yes and before, partially in response to its I think overuse and
it saturates the discourse around how improv can help.
Which I've expressed for other reasons why I think that's unhelpful, but I've always felt that part of why it's a problem is because it's also just a very limited view into how to successfully improv, which is something that we do in our games and want to do a lot of and want to do as well as we can. So I guess I'll kick off with one particular thought just to sort of put the bow on yes and hopefully open the door back to you to talk about some of the other useful tools and frameworks, because yes and the sort of ensuing structures they're around are all about maintaining the narrative momentum of a scene. It is one of the ways that can be done, and it's a very easy, very intuitive way that can be done. It basically allows the scene to never grind to a halt, and it does so in a way that doesn't make the other guy you're doing the scene with suddenly have to think really hard to come up with something clever to keep things going. So let's move beyond yes and.
The first thing that I'm going to lay in is, I remember so distinctly it being taught to me. It is the idea of something called the absurdity curve in improv. Have you heard of this before?
Possibly not by those terms, but I think I know the exact concept you're about to describe.
Yeah, the way it was illustrated to me is that you are playing a scene where one person comes in and they are washing the dishes, and then another person enters the scene and screams at the top of their voice, which I'm not going to do for the consideration of microphone, comes into the scene and screams at the top of their voice, "Giant space monkeys!" We go from washing the dishes to giant space monkeys in a immediate leap of absurdity. We start in one place. There is a world, there is a tone that is established. There is a starting point, but then often the impulse of a performer, an improviser, especially an experienced improviser, is to make the jump with a big idea to another big place. This can present problems. It presents problems in the scene because where do you go from giant space monkeys? And it also presents problems in that there is a story that should be living underneath an improv scene, and stories need to happen beat by beat by beat. And this was explained to me as something called the absurdity curve. You can start at washing the dishes and then you can end up with giant space monkeys, but you need to build it there by a gradient, by a series of offers that are laid down and picked up that can take you two giant space monkeys over time.
Yeah.
Have you ever, when you think about that example, giant space monkeys, can you think about examples in tabletop either design or experiences at the table with players you might have had, which carry some of that energy?
I can. But before I do, I want to share. This has just reminded me of a story we were doing an improv game, which you might have played before, where I think it's called. We called it Hitchhiker. It might not always be called that. You had three people who were sat in a car, and a fourth person would sit in one of the seats as a hitchhiker, and you'd rotate each time. But each time a person sat in the seat, they would have to come in with a kind of characterization, and everyone else in the car had to take on that same character quirk, whatever it might be. This was a lot of fun because you'd get somebody who would sit down and they'd go, "Yes, thank you, I'm late." And then the driver would go, "I'll drive quickly then." And it set the tone of the whole thing. And we're just having this fun little interaction. And it was very easy and very organic to bounce off until one guy sat in the car and he went, "Yeah, hello." And the problem with that was it was too funny. And the rest of the 5-minute scene was just four people shouting over each other in German accents because it was too funny. We were just like, it's because we were kids and we were having way too much fun with this idea. But it's that same thing of like, it started at 10.
Yeah.
There was nowhere to go.
Absolutely.
Look, in a role-playing game, what I think where this concept is most applicable is the sort of incongruity maxim, which is to say, if you have a party and, Roland the Good shows up, and then, Slagathor the Wizard shows up, and then Fart Punch the Fart Puncher shows up.
Yeah, classic example.
We've got this serious wizard, we've got this serious warrior, and then we've got this absolute ridiculous joke character, right? So now, what tone? What is the story even?
Absolutely.
And I've been on the wrong side of this before. I was playing in a relatively self-serious campaign, and then me and another guy at the table showed up as two Kenku brothers called Jürgen and Jürgen. And the whole, no, I am Jürgen, he is Jürgen. And the problem is, it's that same thing of the German guy in the car, which wasn't me, by the way. It was just too funny.
Yeah.
And nothing else could exist in that space.
Absolutely. And I feel like, because I still play with people who I learned these lessons from, and we can talk about the absurdity curve. I'll sometimes talk about it in the context of a session 0, sometimes in the context of a game that feels like it's going off the rails, but I know as the GM that we need to sort of like come back in together. So it can be a useful thing to speak to. And the other big coaching point that always was laid to me was absurdity curve was taught to us because one of the great improv rules is to resist the urge to be funny and instead lean into the instinct to be obvious, to go, what is the natural next small step that we can take to get us to the next place.
Now, I think one of the challenges with all improvisational tools in tabletop RPGs is almost the entire body of wisdom around improv, whether it's improv theater or improv comedy, is about successfully improvising for the benefit of an audience. There is no audience in RPGs. There's just the players. And you are doing it for each other, which is very, very different. So some of these things, and I mean, what you were just talking about is a great example of that sort of, do the obvious and play to what's serious is very much for the audience's benefit. But actually, sometimes at the table, we want to flagrantly ignore that advice because we want to do the funny thing. And we want to feel okay doing the funny thing. Now, the challenge is then as GMs, you have to marry that funny thing back into the tone of the world and whatever story you're trying to tell. We talked a little bit about that in the 3 layers of storytelling. But one of the weird things about RPGs is you can also just like mind wipe. Someone can say or do something that's really dumb to be really funny. And then you just continue on like as though that thing didn't actually happen because it was for the benefit of the table for a laugh.
We hope you enjoyed that preview of this month's bonus episode of The One Shot Show. The full version is a whole 30 minutes long. These bonus episodes are a deeper dive into topics that are just a little bit too chunky to fit into our regular episodes. If you want to hear that full version, you can find it right now by joining us on our Patreon. Thanks for listening.